BORTLE here. This is number 13, right? Or 14? I forgot.
Or 14.
Oh my goodness. Let's go. BORTLE here, back from the LCS 14 event of the online format. We have here top 8 contestants, Cormac and Ryan Yu, running the same main deck, pure Zoodiac. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel.
Hi, Wortle. How you doing? I'm feeling good
Hi.
to top another event. Yeah.
Yeah, hello. This was fun.
What made you guys decide to play pure Zoodiac for this event?
I think I'll let Ryan take this one first because he's been playing it a little bit longer than I have.
Yeah, so it started in, I want to say March, when our friend Herman Hansen, also like part of the group we're in called WAF, he started playing pure Zoodiac as kind of a fun thing since he was bored with the game. And it went through a lot of phases over that month. Like, he wasn't able to top any of the LCSs because the deck is very hard to build. There's a lot of utility cards you have to fill in. And even though right now we kind of have a standardized build, a lot of that is because Herman played the deck like relentlessly for 2 months. He tested like every sort of option there was, like Shuffle Reborn, the Sky Striker cards like Eagle Booster, and eventually we arrived on the list that you see now with the Solemns, and we're playing Chalice right now. But yeah, this is all really just thanks to Herman, because he was really invested in the deck, and then he just made it so good, and we couldn't resist playing it after he told us to try it.
Wow, what a great inspiration. Yes, if you put time into it, you get some great results. Seeing both of y'all top 8, so that's pretty amazing. So, what knocked you guys out of the top 8? What decks beat you guys?
So for myself, I lost to Tri-Brigade Zoodiac in top 8, which is normally a fairly favorable matchup for this deck, but I just kind of got a little bit unlucky in my rounds. My opponent was playing Contact C in a side deck, and that's really good against Pure Zoo. So he drew it in game 2 and game 3, so it really helped him there.
Yeah, I lost to Dragon Link in top 8. I mean, lost the die roll, and he opened 3 extenders, and then game 2, he opened like 5 gas cards. But that's how the matchup is. It's pretty close to 50-50. No complaints.
And this main deck looks pretty nice. But before we jump right into the deck profile, would you guys like to do some shoutouts, starting with Cormac?
Sure, yeah. I'll do a couple of shoutouts. So first off, like Ryan was saying, shoutouts to Herman. He's been playing this deck for a ridiculous amount of time, and he was putting in effort into seeing all the changes in the format that were happening, like almost like week to week, and seeing what you would play instead. And then there was a lot of time pre Lightning Overdrive where he was playing it, and it was a very different list in a very different format. And there were some events where he was like unfortunate in his results, but we saw that he was getting closer and closer, and then he was doing well in remote duel events. And in the most recent 3v3 LCS, he'd gone, I think, 9-0 in his own matches, and his team had made top 4. So that was the point where I think where a lot of us fully were like, all right, okay, I think there's a bit more to this deck now at this stage in the format. So shout out to Herman first off. He's the main inspiration for this deck. And then as Ryan said, shout out to WAF, which is our main group of people that we're always working with. It's some particular people in there. Christian Thomas, who played this event with us, did a bunch of like good theory with us for this deck. Hashim Mustafa, who did a whole bunch of testing with the combo deck specifically for us for this format, because focusing on trying to play this deck, and this deck requires a lot of very strong like technical play and a lot of very niche scenarios where you need to know where to use your interactions at the right time every time. So you really need to know all those matchups inside out to make sure that you give yourself the best win percentage into all the matchups, particularly the combo ones. So Hash really helped a whole lot with that. And Paolo also played this deck with us, and he bubbled. I think he came 11th, and yeah, he got really close as well. He played a very similar list to ours as well. So they're the main people I'd like to shout out.
Like Cormac said, shoutouts to Herman, like first and foremost. Hash, Christian, Paulo, especially Hash, because he like spent so much time testing and talking with us, even though it was never his intent to play the LCS, since he was busy with other things. Yeah, aside from that, I guess shout out to my team, Team Nation. I'm sure Cormac also wants to shout out his team.
Oh yeah,
Games.
shout out to my team, EMAN Games as well. Yeah, Facebook, and YouTube, etc., etc.
Yeah, thanks to BORTLE for having us on.
Oh yes, of course, and we'll try to have some more of that information down in the description down below, so check it out, BORTLE Nation. Well, without further ado, I guess Cormac, if you'd like to take part of the first, deck profile run, let's go.
Sure, yeah, going through the main deck. So you see that we play 10 Zoodiac monsters with the 3 Tenki and the 1 Barrage, which give us 14 zoos. So going first, mathematically, the best number to have, the best number of zoos to have in your main deck when going first would be 15. But going second, the best number of zoos to have in your deck mathematically is 13. So the way that we sort of compromised on this was to play 14 because initially we were playing 3 Whiptail and making it 15, but we wanted to find space for a few more, like just the extra utility card. And a lot of the time we would find ourselves with a clean siding pattern, but we'd want to side out one zoo. So if you play 14 in your deck, post side when you're going second, you can side out one zoo with the rest of your cards, and then it's like you have your clean 13, which is the optimal number when going second. We chose to cut the Whiptail to 2 because Ram is your best one to have on its own going first because it's the highest defense and it protects you from impermanent on your Trident. And then Thoroughblade is the biggest attack, which allows you to put your opponent under a threshold of damage the fastest or the easiest, which means that later on the following turn, you have the ability to kill them faster. Also, the ability that, when you draw a handful of like 3 or 4 Zoodiac monsters, Thoroughblade is one that lets you dig for your non-engine. Obviously, it's very good for that. The one Bunny Blast is in here because it's another name, and particularly when your hands are consisting of only Rapier or Tenki as your only way to get to a Zoodiac monster, the Bunny Blast is really important because your Rapier play allows you to send the Bunny Blast, and then using the Chakanine to revive the Bunny Blast and Dryden popping the Bunny Blast, you get to add back the Rat for a follow-up zoo on the next turn, because you really want to have another zoo in your hand every single turn to be able to continue playing, because we don't have like BORTLE, for example, in the game. For the hand traps, we play Ash, Imperm, and Veiler. We found that these were the most reliable ones into the main decks of the format, particularly against Tri-Brigade Zoo. These ones are really strong. You can see with the Veilers and the Imperms, we also play Forbidden Chalice. Effect negation, particularly against Tri-Zoo, but also against Dragon Link, is really, really strong, because in the Tri-Brigade matchup, you just want to hit all the names. They only really have 2 main pushes every turn, which is their normal summon and their Keras. Sometimes they have Barrage as well, but that's really unlikely. So those cards were really effective there. Ash is just generically quite strong. And against the Dragon Link matchup, these hand traps are fairly decent, and the important thing in that matchup is that preventing them from full comboing, you want to be able to have something that deals with the seal that they're usually going to end on, like no matter what. So Chalice and Imperm are very good for that. And also when you set up your Zeus, you want to make sure that you just have a way to deal with the Levianeer destroying your board, because that's the only way that they're really going to be able to come back if your Zeus gets outed in some way, shape, or form. So having Impermanence and Chalice, and even Veiler, for that respect, when you set up a Zeus, it's pretty much a lock at that stage if you have a 4 or 6 material Zeus. It's one of those cards against Dragon Link matchup. Most of the time, anyway. You'll see then for the rest of the cards we have, like I said before, the Tenki Barrage, Desires. I think Desire is just the best pot in this deck. You don't care about what you banish. The 6 Solemns, like we were saying, Herman went through a whole bunch of iterations of this deck with different tech cards. And for this format, the Solemns are just really strong because going first, they're obviously fantastic, but then going second, they're just really strong interactions against so many of the decks. Strike, particularly in the same vein that I was saying against Dragon, like outing the Levianeer, Strike also works in that vein. It's obviously very good going first, but also going second, it works in the way of dealing with the Levianeer, so allowing you to just be able to make sure that your Zeus gets unouted. Judgment is just a ridiculous trap card in like in most matchups. Just like when you know when to use Judgment in most matchups, and you draw it, you're probably going to win those games, particularly when you're going first. In my list, I played 3 quote-unquote floodgates, which were the Dimensional Fissure, the Macrocosmos, and the Imperial Order. In Ryan's list, he played Triple Skullmeister instead of the 2 Cosmics and the 1 Dimensional Fissure, which you'll see on your screen. But we agreed that the floodgates are just insane cards in this deck. They're obviously just ridiculous. But these ones in particular, initially it was Imperial Order and Macrocosmos because they're just so good into the format. My personal choice for trying to run Dimensional Fissure is I just wanted to see an extra one of those cards, because I found that going first into some of the combo decks, there were times where it was a bit more of a struggle than going second, because the hand traps are quite good when you're going second, like the Veilers and the Imperms, they can be quite strong at stopping them comboing. But against like Dragon Link, for example, those cards, if they're the only interactions that you have, they can be quite underwhelming because they still get a battle phase to clear your Trident, and they still like their cards are just better going second into neg 1, such as Veiler and Impermanence. So just having the extras sort of blowout cards, especially going first, was something that I really liked. And then the Cosmic Cyclones I chose over Maestros myself because I just found that there was enough scenarios, particularly against decks like Tri-Brigade Zoodiac and Dragon Link. So against Dragon Link, Cosmic is really good as a going first card. And going second, something that I disliked about the list that we had prior was that when we didn't play Cosmic in our main deck, was that if they hard drew Tidying, it would be a struggle for the deck because the only real extender that we have is Barrage. So having something like Cosmic Cyclone to work going second in that matchup, if they hard drew a Tidying, would be quite helpful. And against Tri-Brigade Zoodiac, just Cosmic is just a very good card. It functions similarly to Chalice, for example, because you can snipe the Revolt and then they have to summon, and then if they don't have Rugal on their board, then the Shurek doesn't do anything to your Zoodiac because you haven't summoned it yet. Yeah, that was the main deck for me. I don't know if Ryan wants to go over his reasoning for Mini Meister or whatever instead, but yeah, that was me.
Yeah, so like Cormac said, the floodgates are super impactful. I think that's a lot of the reason why people acknowledge Pure Zoo as a deck now. Just drawing one of the floodgates and having Trident on the field is almost always game. But I wasn't as big of a fan as Fisher, because it's proactive, not reactive. So it's a little bit weaker than macro. Like you won't be able to get value out of by chaining to Fractal or something like the Deer Servant. It also only banishes monsters. But that's really nice because your Xyz materials go to the grave. But the main reason I didn't want to play Fisher was because I wanted to find space for 3 Skullmeisters. So you'll notice that in Cormac's list, which is on the screen right now, he only sets 2 Skullmeisters, because there's just not enough room when you're playing Cosmics and the Fisher. And I had an issue with that because Drytron is like not a bad matchup per se, but it's definitely something you can lose to if you don't have 2 to 3 hand traps in your hand. So the difference between 17 and 18 was like around 5% in terms of being able to beat them post side. And in game 1, having the 3 Skullmeisters in the main, as opposed to just Ash, Veiler, and Imperm, increases your chances of winning by like 10%. So I thought that was more valuable than having the auto win Fisher when you go first, since I'm more concerned about going second. And even against Dragon, like Skullmeister is definitely not as good as Cosmic, and you side out Skullmeister. But I hit like Tiding Engrave to stop an extender. I hit Baby Dragons, Black Metal, Seal Engrave too was super good. So I would probably main Skullmeister again. It was fun.
And by doing so, the extra deck, yeah, it's pretty much a zoo extra deck, right? So would you like to? Is there any perfect ratio, or is this it?
I mean, this is perfect. There's a This is what we settled on like a month ago, I'd say.
Mhm.
Before this, going off of Herman's list from the LCS, it was Mega Collapse instead of Asa. But once Contact C became popular, we just switched that out, and yeah, I don't think there's anything to say about it. The best card in the extra deck, like aside from the obvious ones, is definitely Drill Driver. I think a lot of people underestimate Zoo's ability to OTK and close out the game, but you can very consistently just kill them in 2 turns. Like hand trap them, summon Zoo, attack Zeus, and then you Zeus them, they pass, you summon a Zoo, and then it's game. Because of the Drill Driver having 25. So
Yeah,
yeah.
usually the threshold for it most of the time is that if they're under 7100 or lower life points and you have access to a Thoroughblade, either in your hand or in your graveyard, the Zeus plus the Thoroughblade and the Drill Driver will allow you to do game because the Chakanine will revive the Thoroughblade and then you put the Drill Driver on top of it, which just makes like OTKs really easy.
Oh man, that's pretty insane. Soldier Driver, Vespinato, MVP guys. Would you?
After Zeus.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There you go. Would you guys like to run down the side deck? And yeah, again, y'all mentioned that Contact C is making a huge like splash in this meta.
The Dimensional Shifter was something that myself and Ryan, I think, were in particular, were quite strong about having in our side deck because we found against just Dragon Link and Dry Brigade and Drytron, all the 3 main combo decks, just Shifter is just a fantastic card to have in there. Just the other alternatives to play more fair hand traps were just a bit, they weren't guaranteeing your ability to get a turn in the same way, and Shifter as a singular hand trap against the combo decks, being able to shut them off as opposed to needing to draw 2 hand traps in most of those matchups meant that you had to draw like a fewer combinations of cards because it would, instead of being like 2 hand traps plus your Zoo plus against Dragon Link, for example, they're probably still ending on a seal. You would need to have like basically a 4 card combination. So like you need to have like a 2 hand traps, a Zoo, and then like a Chalice or an Imperm, for example. Shifter just reduces the number of cards that you need to be able to play going second to those decks. It's just super strong. Contact C was something that we decided on probably about a week or so ago. Particularly for the Dragon Link and the Tri Brigade matchup, while also covering things such as like Prank Kids in the Mirror match, which was good because the Mirror ended up being quite prevalent at this tournament. Yeah, the card was quite strong. I drew it a couple of times in Mirror matches and it was actually quite strong for me. We were unsure about how good it would be in Mirrors, but if you draw it in your opening hand, it's quite good. In later turns, it can be a little bit underwhelming, but usually by that stage the game's it's usually kind of like devolved into a grind, and if you just have like Zoo plus interaction for the Zeus is the most important thing. So just it's dead drawing, it can be a little bit of an issue, but seeing in your opening hand can stifle them, and that can be enough to allow you to take over in that match. Then the cycle reader, we initially didn't really want something that was going to only apply to one matchup. We wanted things in our side deck that would be able to apply for multiple matchups, so that it would be more flexible. But the Drytron matchup was scary enough when they go first, that we really felt that we just needed to have a blowout against that deck. And we debated between this card and Retaliating Sea, but we found that this card was more reliable into Drytron, because there's times where when you hold Retaliating Sea for the ritual spell against Drytron, they could have a live Herald of the Orange Light by that stage. So Cycle Reader is just more consistent in that sense. The two Skullmeister, I wasn't mining them, so I was siding them. In this position, Ryan was siding two Cosmic Cyclones. We agreed that, like, no matter what, these cards would either be in the main or the side. Like, Meister's just fantastic. Against other cards, fantastic against Drytron. Well, you need it against Drytron, I would say, alongside the other things that you put in. And then it covers a bunch of other, like, rogue matchups, like we're saying, like Dinosaur and Prank Kid. Like, it's versatile to make sure that you don't lose to matchups that, if you didn't respect in your side deck enough, you would maybe lose to that you otherwise shouldn't. And then we have the 4 back removal cards, the Lightning Storms and the Harpy's Feather Duster. Lightning Storm is also particularly good against Tri-Brigade Zoodiac, because even if they don't play a whole bunch of trap cards, because their deck is ending on a bunch of link monsters, you can just Lightning Storm away all the monsters, and it can be really impactful there, even if they don't throw trap cards. So that card is just fantastic all around. And also in the mirror matches, strikes and judgments are very prevalent in that matchup. So making sure that you have something to deal with those before you go to summon your zoo or deal with the Zeus, then they're quite good in that respect.
Okay, perfect. And Ryan, what are your thoughts on this Contact C card?
Contact C was surprisingly good. Initially, we wrote it off because, as Cormac mentioned, it's very bad late game in the mirror match. But early game, it can definitely be good. Like, if you make them go first, which is common in the Zoo mirror, because card advantage is basically everything, you can Contact C them, and then since you don't have Zoo's Engrave, they can't outside Zoo back. So you're freezing the Dryden for a turn. Definitely not as good as something like Chalice or Imperm, but it's still better than keeping in our floodgates, so we ended up siding in like 1 to 2. But yeah, the main application was Dragon Link. The side deck is actually designed around Shifter, because we found that Shifter was the most consistent way to beat Dragon Link. So if you Shifter them, the most they will ever end on is Seal, and possibly Hydron Tidying. So the majority of the time is just Seal, though, because math. When they end on the Seal, you need to have either a way to like beat the Seal, or a way to stop them from making the Seal. So that's also why we valued like Chalice and Impermanence really highly. And also Lightning Storm, because all 9 of those cards are just very good outs to Seal. Chalice and Impermanence, obviously, like double going first too, which is why they're in the main deck. They're very versatile. They're also great against like Trizoo, the mirror match. But against Dragon, we were running out of cards that we could play to complement the Shifter. So, like, aside from Chalice, Imperm, and Lightning Storm, like 9 isn't really enough, because we don't want to waste any opportunities we have to win going second against Dragon when we draw the Shifter. And I think Christian or Paulo or Hash, we'll just say the group, eventually came to the conclusion that Contact C with Shifter will always stop them from making Seal, because the only out to Shifter is to make 5 Rex or B-Cop. But if you Contact C them, the only out to Contact C is Shifter, is 5 Rex or B-Cop. But if you Shifter them, they just can't do that, and then they die. So that was like the main reason Contact was in there. And Trizoo is honestly more of an added benefit, because you can summon it to the Fairy Zone and they pass.
In closing, any final thoughts on this LCS event, guys?
It was a really fun event. I'm glad that I played. This was one of the more fun events that I think I've played. I think Pure Zoo is genuinely just quite an enjoyable deck to play, because it has longer games than playing like a combo deck, for example. And I really felt that playing this deck close to optimally, you really, like, most of the time that you were losing games with this deck was down to your own misplays, your own actions, rather than just being blown out by your opponent. So recognizing that, it's kind of like a nice exercise to see like how, like, where your level is, what your level is at in the game, and how you can improve. So I really found this deck set sort of quite enjoyable, and also kind of a bit of a learning experience. And this LTS was just, it really highlighted that. It really showed that, like, the preparation that we put in terms of testing our technical play and our deck building, because there was a lot of other Pure Zoos in this tournament. I think the effort that we put in really showed us we were the only Pure Zoos that made top cut.
A lot of people, they just write this deck off as Solemns go first, draw floodgate, go second, make Zeus, blah blah blah, like super easy. But the deck, when it doesn't draw that well, it's really a struggle to win against powerful decks like admittedly much more powerful decks like Drytron and Dragon, because misusing like even one interrupt usually makes you lose. Like that one body often matters a lot because Zoo comes very close to winning most of its games, and it usually can't push through like one seal. So it was a lot of fun to like test the deck and then like learn by making mistakes in terms of how we should be playing each matchup to increase our chances of winning.
That's correct. And again, guys, thank you so much for being on this channel today. And you can only win from here on, from top 8. So you can only do better, top 4, finals victory, and eventually Pure Zoodiac probably be all over the map, man.
That's the plan.
Yeah, there was a lot of it this weekend, like a shocking amount.
Yeah, we were surprised how much there was. I think it was the second most represented deck in the end,
Yeah,
and it
that's
was
the Dragon.
and it was the most represented after day 2. This deck converted quite well, but outside of top cut where it was just us. But yeah, I think showing that showed that the deck is really taking over the meta. It's more than just a bit of a joke, but you have to know how to play it properly in order to fully utilize it to its maximum ability.
And listeners, if you're not a part of BORTLE Nation, sub for BORTLE. It's that easy and it's free. Oh God, yes. BORTLE out.